Who gave you the right to evict tenants from my family's building? Evelyn Vale's question cut through Riverside Wash just as Victor Crane reached for Daniel Mercer's keys. She stood beneath the pale light of dawn wearing Daniel's brown work coat, rainwater still darkening its sleeves, while a sealed deed lay open on the folding table. Noah stepped from behind the counter and placed one small coin on its embossed seal. "That's hers," he whispered. Victor's smile tightened. "That document is no longer valid." The last dryer stopped turning, and the entire room went still. 3 hours earlier, the laundromat had smelled of detergent, hot metal, and wet pavement. Fluorescent tubes buzzed above rows of aging machines, turning every puddle on the tile floor into a strip of cold white light. Daniel moved quietly through his closing routine, wiping lint from dryer doors with a gray shop towel while Noah finished a math worksheet behind the counter. The boys' sneakers did not touch the floor. They swung beneath the stool in a slow, tired rhythm. Outside, rain struck the glass hard enough to blur the neon closed sign into a red stain. Daniel checked the wall clock, then the rent notice folded beneath the register. 7 days late. Victor had circled the total in blue ink and added a courteous note reminding him that the apartment behind the storefront was tied to his employment. Daniel folded it again before Noah could look up. "Almost done, Dad?" "Almost." Daniel tested the front lock, then glanced toward dryer 14. Its drum rolled with a low metallic shutter that did not belong in a machine supposedly fitted with a new motor the previous week. He stopped to listen. 3 heavy turns. A scrape. Then silence. The repair invoice was pinned to the service board beside the manager's office, clean and official. Its total larger than Daniel earned in 2 months. He had been told not to touch the machine because Crane Management had already paid a certified contractor. Still, the sound bothered him. New bearings did not complain like old bones. A shadow moved beyond the fogged glass. At first Daniel thought it was someone running beneath the awning. Then the figure stopped directly outside the door. A woman stood in the rain with one arm wrapped around a faded cloth bag. Her dark hair clung to her face. Water streamed from the hem of her coat, and her free hand trembled near the door without knocking. Noah looked up from his worksheet. "Is she waiting for somebody?" Daniel did not answer. He watched the woman glance toward the street, then toward the locked laundromat, as though deciding which place offered less danger. A black sedan slowed near the curb but continued past. The woman pressed closer to the brick wall, trying to shelter the bag against her chest instead of herself. Daniel's hand settled on the key ring at his belt. Before he could move, his phone vibrated across the counter. A message from Victor Crane filled the screen. "Closing time means closing time. No exceptions tonight." Daniel read it twice. The wording was polite. The timing was not. Outside, the woman's knees softened, and she caught herself against the glass, leaving a wet palm print beneath the closed sign. Noah slid down from the stool but stayed behind the counter as his father had taught him. "Dad," he said quietly, "she's shaking." Daniel turned the lock. The bell above the door gave a thin metallic cry as rain and wind rushed into the room. He caught the woman by the elbow before she fell and guided her toward the nearest chair. She tried to speak, but her breath came in shallow white bursts. Daniel removed his brown work coat and placed it around her shoulders without asking her name. The cloth bag slipped against the chair leg. For 1 second, a brass key marked VPT appeared beside a waterproof envelope before her hand covered both. Then Daniel noticed the warning form taped outside the manager's office, and the authorization number printed at the bottom did not match the one in Riverside Wash's service log. Daniel's eyes stayed on the authorization number at the bottom of Victor Crane's warning form. 1 digit had been typed twice, and the final letter did not match the code printed in Riverside Wash's service log. He did not point it out. Not yet. Behind him, the woman shivered beneath his brown work coat while rain tapped the glass like impatient fingers. "Can you sit up?" Daniel asked. "I think so. Take your time." Her voice was steady enough to be guarded, but her hands betrayed her. One remained wrapped around the faded cloth bag at her feet. The other clutched the edge of Daniel's coat as though warmth itself might be taken back if she loosened her grip. Noah stood behind the counter with his workbook pressed to his chest. He watched his father pour warm water into a paper cup, then glanced toward the woman's soaked shoes and the thin stream running from them across the tile. The fluorescent lights caught the water and turned it silver. The front bell rang again. Victor Crane entered without shaking the rain from his umbrella. He wore a charcoal overcoat over a pressed white shirt, and his polished shoes stopped just inside the doorway, safely beyond the puddle. A neighborhood manager named Susan Bell followed him, holding a tablet against her chest. Behind them came Mr. Talbot, the last customer of the night, still carrying the laundry basket he had forgotten near dryer 6. "Daniel," Victor said softly, "we discussed this." She nearly collapsed. "That does not change the policy. It changes what I do." Victor's expression remained pleasant, almost concerned. He closed his umbrella with deliberate care and leaned it against the window. The laundromat smelled of wet wool, detergent, and overheated wiring. Dryer 14 groaned once behind them, a long metallic complaint that made Evelyn glance toward the service board. Victor did not. He walked to the counter and lowered his voice as if protecting Daniel from embarrassment, though everyone in the room could hear. "You have a son to consider, a home attached to this job, a record that already shows delayed rent." Noah's fingers tightened around his workbook. Daniel moved half a step so his body blocked the boy from Victor's direct line of sight. "Leave him out of it." "I am trying to keep him in it," Victor replied. "In his school, in his home, in a stable environment." Susan tapped the tablet awake. Its blue glow sharpened the lines of her face. "The neighborhood safety policy prohibits unauthorized individuals from remaining inside a commercial property after closing," she said, "especially when their identity cannot be verified." Evelyn lifted her eyes. "My identity is not the issue." Susan looked at her wet clothes, the worn bag, and Daniel's coat around her shoulders. "Ma'am, I understand this may feel personal. You haven't asked my name. We are trying to avoid escalation. By speaking as if I'm not here?" A brief silence opened between the rows of machines. Noah looked from Susan to Evelyn, confused by the careful words adults used when they wanted someone to disappear without saying so. Mr. Talbot shifted his basket from one hip to the other. "I've been coming here 12 years, he said. "Never seen people sleeping inside before." "She isn't sleeping here," Daniel said. "Not yet," Victor answered. His tone never rose. That was what made it heavier. He spoke like a man closing a file, not a man threatening a family. "First it is 10 minutes out of the rain. Then customers stop feeling safe. Then the city asks questions. Then insurance gets involved. I am preventing a small act of compassion from becoming a larger problem." Daniel looked at Evelyn. Her jaw had tightened, but she did not defend herself again. He recognized the expression. It was the face of someone who had learned that every explanation could be turned into another reason not to believe her. He reached for the clean gray towel on the folding table and placed it beside her cup. "Dry your hands," he said. Victor exhaled through his nose. "You are not listening." "I am." "Then close the store." "Not while she's shaking." The 3 sentences landed quickly. After them came only the hum of the vending machine and the faint rattle of rainwater in the gutter outside. Victor's gaze dropped to Daniel's rolled sleeves, the grease beneath his fingernails, the worn face of the watch that had belonged to his wife. Something like pity passed across his features, polished enough to look kind from a distance. "Daniel, you are a skilled maintenance man," he said, "but property management requires judgment beyond repairing belts and bearings." Mr. Talbot looked away. Susan stared at her tablet. Noah lowered his workbook, his cheeks reddening though the words had not been aimed at him. Daniel did not defend his intelligence. He did not mention the nights he had kept 6 broken machines running with salvaged parts so Victor could avoid paying for replacements. He simply knelt beside Evelyn's chair and adjusted the small portable heater so the warm air reached her feet without blowing directly against her wet clothes. "Better?" he asked. Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. Her eyes remained on Victor. She had expected Daniel's kindness to vanish under pressure, or at least to become louder, more theatrical, something meant to shame the people opposing him. Instead, he made the room warmer by 2 degrees and said nothing more than necessary. Victor removed a printed form from his leather folder. He placed it on the counter, flattening each corner with his fingertips. This is a formal violation notice. I am authorized to document tonight's incident and review your employment status at dawn. Daniel looked down at the page. The same mismatched code sat beneath Victor's signature. The blue ink Daniel looked at the faint VPT stamp beneath the blurred authorization code, then folded the violation notice once and placed it beside the service log instead of throwing it away. Evelyn watched the motion carefully. He did not ask what the initials meant. He did not look toward the waterproof envelope in her bag. He simply set the paper where it would stay dry. You should change out of those clothes, he said. The dryer's already running. I can pay. You don't have to. Everyone says that before they decide what they want. Daniel met her eyes for a moment, then reached beneath the counter and took out a clean plastic laundry bag. The fluorescent light flattened the exhaustion in his face, but his voice remained calm. Then tonight can be different. He carried the bag to a narrow restroom near the back wall and checked the lock before handing it to her. The latch had been sticking for weeks. He tightened the loose screw with a coin from the register so the door would close properly, then stepped away without waiting to be thanked. Noah sat on the stool behind the counter, watching the rain crawl down the glass. His worksheet remained open to a page of fractions, but the last problem was unfinished. Dad. Yeah. Are we in trouble? Daniel wiped a streak of water from the floor with the gray shop towel. Maybe. Because we let her in? Because some people think rules matter more than reasons. Noah considered that with the serious expression children wore when they were trying to fit an adult answer into a smaller world. Does that mean the rule is bad? Daniel wrung the towel over a bucket. It means we should understand why it exists before we use it to hurt somebody. He did not look toward the rent notice beneath the register. He did not mention the apartment, the school district, or the 7 days Victor had given him before the late fee doubled. Instead, he crossed to dryer 14 and listened. The drum turned with a deep scrape every 3rd rotation. The sound traveled through the metal panel and into the floor. Daniel crouched, pressed 2 fingers against the housing, then glanced at the service sticker pasted beside the door. New motor installed. The handwriting was too neat. No grease on the edges. No wrench marks around the lower bolts. Whoever had signed the receipt had either never opened the machine or had cleaned every trace of the work, which no hurried contractor ever did. Evelyn emerged from the restroom wearing Daniel's brown coat over a borrowed Riverside wash t-shirt and a pair of gray sweatpants he kept for emergencies. Her wet clothes were folded inside the plastic bag. She stopped when she saw him kneeling beside the dryer. Is it dangerous? Not yet. That isn't reassuring. It means I can keep it running long enough to dry your clothes. He opened the service panel and adjusted the belt tension by hand. The machine quieted slightly, though the old bearing still complained beneath the hum. Daniel could have shut it down and saved himself another problem. Instead, he fed $2 from the tip jar into the slot and reset the timer. The jar held only $6 and some change. Noah noticed. He slid off the stool, walked to the vending machine, and pulled 1 quarter from his pocket. It was the coin Daniel had given him after dinner for a bag of chips. Noah turned it between his fingers, looking once at the bright orange button on the machine. Then he walked to Evelyn. Here, he said. She looked at his small open palm. What for? The dryer. Dad says it eats quarters. You should keep it. I'm not that hungry. He was hungry enough to keep looking at the vending machine, but not enough to take the coin back. Evelyn's face changed by only a fraction. The guarded line of her mouth softened, then tightened again as though she did not trust the feeling. Thank you, she said. Noah nodded and returned behind the counter, where Daniel pushed half of the sandwich from his lunch bag toward him without comment. The bread had gone slightly dry at the edges. Noah ate anyway. Evelyn closed her fingers around the quarter. You planned that? She asked Daniel. Planned what? teaching him to give things away. Daniel adjusted the dryer panel and stood. I teach him not to ignore people, even when it costs him, especially then. The words were simple, but something in them made Evelyn look toward the folded rent notice beneath the register. Daniel saw her glance and moved the paper into a drawer before she could read it. Not from shame, from habit. His struggles belonged to him, not to every stranger who passed through the door. The front bell chimed. Mr. Talbot had returned without his laundry basket. He held his phone at chest height, camera already recording. I left my receipt, he said, though his eyes were fixed on Evelyn. It's by dryer 6, Daniel answered. I'll get it. No need. Talbot stepped farther inside and angled the phone toward the chair where Evelyn's wet bag rested. People in the neighborhood deserve to know what management allows after hours. Daniel crossed the floor and stopped between the camera and Evelyn. He did not touch the phone. Turn it off. I'm on public property. You're inside a private business. Victor said this is a safety issue. She's cold, not dangerous. Talbot gave a short laugh. You don't know that. Neither do you. The dryers continued turning behind them, warm air carrying the smell of fabric softener and hot dust. Daniel's shoulders remained loose, his hands open at his sides. He could have embarrassed Talbot by pointing out the forgotten receipt sticking from the man's own coat pocket. He could have raised his voice. Instead, he shifted one step to block the lens completely. You can take your receipt, he said. You cannot take her dignity. Talbot's thumb hovered over the screen. For a moment, no one moved. Then Noah quietly lifted the gray shop towel from the counter and held it up against the side of his face, copying the way his father had shielded Evelyn from the camera. The gesture was small and clumsy, but Talbot saw it. He lowered the phone. You're making a mistake, he muttered. Daniel retrieved the receipt, handed it over, and opened the door. Drive safe. Talbot left into the rain. The bell rattled once above him and then settled. Evelyn looked down at the quarter in her palm. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Why? Daniel walked back to the dryer and wiped the service sticker with his thumb. Beneath the fresh white label, an older maintenance tag had been covered rather than removed. He peeled back one corner. The serial number underneath matched the worn motor still inside the machine, not the expensive replacement listed on the invoice. Because being looked at like you're less than human changes a person, he said quietly. And because somebody should stop it when they can. Evelyn's fingers tightened around Noah's quarter. Then the brass VPT key slipped from the pocket of Daniel's coat and struck the tile with a clear metallic click. Daniel picked it up, wiped away a streak of rainwater, and held it out to her without turning it over again. She stared at the key, then at the uncovered serial number on dryer 14, and for the first time that night, she seemed to understand that Daniel's kindness had done more than keep her warm. It had preserved the one piece of evidence Victor had assumed no one poor enough to work there would ever notice. The brass VPT key rested in Evelyn's palm, still damp from the floor, while Daniel's thumb held back the corner of the fresh service sticker on dryer 14. Beneath it, the older maintenance tag showed a serial number that matched the worn motor inside the machine. The new invoice claimed that motor had been replaced 8 days earlier. Evelyn looked from the tag to Daniel, then toward the manager's office. You knew this was here? I knew the sound was wrong. That isn't what I asked. No, the answer came without defensiveness. Daniel let the sticker fall back into place and wiped the metal with his gray towel. The dryer continued turning, each third rotation carrying the same dull scrape through the laundromat floor. Noah sat behind the counter, chewing the last bite of Daniel's sandwich and watching the adults with the quiet attention of a child who understood that something had changed but not yet why. Evelyn slipped the key into the pocket of the brown coat. Her face had closed again. Daniel could see the doubt return. Not suspicion born from cruelty, but the measured caution of someone who had learned that helpful men sometimes became interested only after they glimpsed something valuable. You saw the envelope, she said. A corner of it. And the key. It fell on the floor. And now you found a false repair invoice. Daniel stood slowly. I found an invoice that doesn't match the machine. That sounds carefully phrased. Because I don't know enough yet. The fluorescent tubes hummed overhead. Rainwater ticked inside the metal gutter outside. Slower now. But the glass remained clouded with cold. Evelyn studied his work shirt, the grease beneath his nails, the old watch at his wrist. She did not look convinced. People do not usually become cautious after finding leverage, she said. They become curious. Daniel glanced at the waterproof envelope still tucked inside her cloth bag. Your business is yours. Until it affects this building. Then it becomes relevant when you decide it does. For a second, Evelyn seemed almost irritated by the answer. She turned away and walked toward the folding table, keeping the coat wrapped tightly around herself. The quarter Noah had given her clicked softly against the brass key inside the pocket. Daniel returned to the counter and unfolded Victor's violation notice beside the service log. Under the brighter task lamp, the mismatch was easier to see. The warning form carried the same authorization prefix printed on the invoice for dryer 14, but the most recent maintenance records used a different sequence entirely. Daniel ran one finger beneath both codes without touching the ink. What is it? Evelyn asked. Maybe nothing. You've said that twice. Because mistakes happen. And if it isn't a mistake? Daniel pulled a small receipt pad from beneath the register and copied the numbers in pencil. Then somebody should be able to explain it. His old phone vibrated near the cash drawer. A message from Victor appeared on the screen. Confirm the woman has left. Do not interfere with security documentation. Daniel read it and set the phone face down. A second message arrived almost immediately. There is no reason to examine maintenance records tonight. Evelyn saw only the final line before the screen went dark. Her expression sharpened. Did you tell him what you found? No, did Noah? The boy looked up, startled. Daniel answered before the question could settle on him. He hasn't touched my phone. Noah shook his head. I was doing fractions. Evelyn nodded once, accepting the answer but not the implication. Victor had warned Daniel away from records Daniel had not mentioned. Still, there were ordinary explanations. Security cameras, Mr. Talbot's video, a routine alert from the machine panel. Daniel seemed determined to consider each one before deciding anything darker. He crossed to the manager's office and stopped outside the glass door. The room beyond was narrow, with a metal desk, a locked filing cabinet, and a wall monitor showing for security feeds. He did not try the handle. Instead, he leaned close enough to read the digital clock in the corner of the screen. What are you doing? Evelyn asked. Checking whether the camera time matches the register. The wall monitor read 11:52. The register display read 11:47. Daniel looked at his watch. 11:47. 5 minutes fast, Evelyn said. Could be set wrong. Could be. You always defend the harmless explanation first? I try not to accuse people before the facts do. Noah slid from the stool and walked to the edge of the counter, careful not to cross into the wet part of the floor. Dad, he said. That clock was right before. Daniel turned. How do you know? You told me I could stop homework at 11:30. I looked at that screen because the little numbers were bigger. Tonight, before the man came back. Noah pointed toward the monitor, then lowered his hand. It said 11:30 when your watch did. Daniel did not praise him for solving anything. He only nodded. Okay, thank you. Evelyn looked at the boy, then at the clock. A 5-minute difference could still be accidental, but not if it had changed during the same night Victor had ordered security documentation. Daniel walked back to the counter and wrote a second note beside the authorization numbers. Camera clock altered after 11:30. He underlined nothing. You are keeping a record, Evelyn said. I keep records for the machines. This isn't a machine. No. But people forget times when they're frightened. He folded the note and slid it beneath the service log. The bell above the front door rang before Evelyn could answer. Susan Bell entered alone, carrying the tablet and a sealed plastic sleeve. She smiled at Noah first, then at Daniel, the way adults sometimes soften their faces around children while preparing to make a parent's life harder. Victor asked me to collect the original violation notice, she said. There was a formatting error. Daniel placed one hand lightly over the paper. What kind of error? Administrative. Which part? The authorization line. Evelyn's eyes shifted toward Susan. Daniel's voice remained calm. How did Victor know I noticed it? Susan paused for less than a second. He reviews all forms. He left 12 minutes ago. He is thorough. She extended her hand. I'll take the original. Daniel did not move the paper. You can make a copy. Susan's smile held. Crane Management owns the document. It was issued to me. Daniel, this does not need to become adversarial. Then a copy should be enough. The sentences came quickly. After them, the room slowed. Dryer 14 scraped once, then again. Susan's tablet cast a pale rectangle across her fingers. And on. The front camera feed behind the glass office door. The timestamp jumped forward another minute too quickly. Evelyn saw it. So did Daniel. Susan followed their gaze and shifted half a step, placing herself between them and the monitor. The system clock drifts, she said. Old equipment. Daniel looked at her. You said Victor asked for the form because of the authorization line. Susan's fingers tightened around the plastic sleeve. Yes. I never told anyone the authorization line was wrong. The polite warmth drained from her face, though only for a breath. Then she glanced toward Evelyn and said, This entire situation began because an unidentified woman refused to leave private property. Evelyn's chin lifted. You still haven't asked my name. That is not relevant to the violation. Then why did Victor instruct security to have me gone before midnight? Susan opened her mouth, stopped, and looked down at the tablet as though the answer might be written there. Daniel noticed the sealed sleeve in her hand carried a printed label. Incident footage, 11:40 to 11:47. 7 minutes. The window matched the time between Victor's departure and Susan's return almost exactly. Daniel asked one simple question. Why was the footage packaged before the incident ended? Susan's eyes flicked toward the office monitor. Then, too quickly, she slipped the sleeve beneath her tablet. The dryer gave another grinding turn. Daniel looked from the hidden sleeve to the altered clock, then to the false invoice under his hand. For the first time, the separate details no longer felt like mistakes. They felt arranged. Daniel kept his eyes on the sealed footage sleeve beneath Susan Bell's tablet. The label said 11:42, 11:47, though the clock above the security feeds now read 5 minutes fast and the night was not yet over. Susan shifted the tablet higher against her chest. This is routine documentation. Prepared before the incident ended? Daniel asked. The system generates clips automatically. Then why is it sealed by hand? Susan's fingers tightened around the plastic edge. For a moment, only Dryer 14 answered, its old bearing dragging through another rotation with a low metallic scrape. Evelyn stood beside the folding table in Daniel's brown coat, one hand inside the pocket around Noah's quarter and the brass VPT key. She did not defend Daniel. She watched him, still uncertain whether his restraint came from character or calculation. The front bell rang again before Susan could answer. Victor Crane entered with the neighborhood manager behind him and a maintenance supervisor named Roy Keller carrying a red toolcase. Victor glanced once at the violation notice under Daniel's hand, then at the security monitor. His smile arrived a fraction too late. I was told there was confusion. About the footage? Daniel asked. About several things. Victor removed his gloves finger by finger and placed them on the counter. Susan, give me the sleeve. Daniel, step away from the office. Roy needs access to the upstairs electrical panel. There's no active fault at the panel, Daniel said. You checked it? The downstairs board. No heat. No burn smell. No tripped breaker. Roy gave a quiet chuckle. You repair washers, Mercer. Commercial electrical is different. Noah looked up from behind the counter. Daniel saw the fear return to the boy's face and moved closer without making the gesture obvious. Then call the fire department, Daniel said. If there's a hazard, they should clear the building. Victor's tone softened. There is no need to alarm customers or create a public scene. There are no customers. Exactly. Let us handle it privately. Then write the reason. The photograph on Evelyn's phone showed the upper landing from an angle no downstairs camera could capture. A filing cart blocked half the corridor. Behind it stood a man in a crane management security jacket, one hand braced against the wall and the other reaching toward a metal cabinet. The image had been taken less than 2 minutes earlier. Daniel looked from the screen to the locked stairwell door. Who sent it? I don't know. Can they send the original? Evelyn typed a reply with cold fingers. The message showed delivered, but no answer came. Victor stepped closer. You should not engage with anonymous messages. This could be harassment. Or evidence, Evelyn said. Or someone trying to manipulate you. Then why is your security badge in the picture? Victor's eyes moved to the corner of the screen. He recovered quickly. Uniforms are easy to copy. That landing isn't. The sentences came sharp and clean. After them, the room slowed again. The printer upstairs stopped with a soft mechanical click. The ventilation fan continued pulling air through the stairwell grill, carrying the smell of paper dust and fresh toner into the laundromat. Daniel did not use the photograph to accuse Victor. He placed the phone face up beneath the task lamp beside the expired authorization codes, the dryer invoice, and the access log. We preserve it, he said. Original file, timestamp, sender information if they answer. No forwarding it around. Evelyn studied him. You don't want everyone to see? Not until we know what it proves. Victor gave a small, relieved nod, mistaking discipline for retreat. At least someone here understands procedure. Daniel looked at him. Procedure protects evidence from people who need it to disappear. The relief vanished. Susan's tablet chimed. She glanced at the screen and immediately lowered its brightness. Daniel caught only part of the notification. Remote camera session closed. Who closed the session? He asked. Automatic timeout. While the upstairs feed is still active? The feed is not active. Noah raised his head from behind the counter. The little red dot was on before. Susan turned toward him. Sweetheart, those lights don't always mean recording. Daniel moved one step closer to his son. Not confrontational, just present. He answered the question he was asked. Noah looked down again, but his shoulders loosened when Daniel rested a hand near the edge of the counter. Evelyn watched the exchange. Daniel had not turned the boy into a witness. He had not praised him for catching an adult in a lie. He had simply kept Susan from making the child doubt what he had seen. The old phone vibrated again. This time, the unknown sender attached a 10-second video. The image shook as whoever held the phone moved behind shelving. A man in the crane jacket pulled files from a cabinet and fed pages into a portable shredder. Another figure stood beyond him, visible only from the shoulders down, wearing polished black shoes wet at the edges. Victor wore the same kind of shoes, but so did half the men who worked in property management. The clip proved destruction. It did not yet prove who ordered it. There, Evelyn said. That's enough. She reached for the phone. Enough for what? Daniel asked. To call the police. And tell them what? That an unidentified person recorded an unidentified employee shredding unidentified files. You saw the badge. A badge is not a name. Evelyn's face hardened. You think we should wait? I think we should keep them from destroying more without giving them a reason to destroy everything. They're already doing it. Then we need the door opened by someone whose authority they can't dispute. Victor gave a quiet laugh. And who would that be? Evelyn looked at him, but did not answer. Daniel saw something pass across her face. Not fear exactly, but the exhaustion of someone who had carried a private truth for too long and no longer trusted what it would cost to reveal it. He turned to Susan. Call the fire department for the electrical complaint you documented. That is unnecessary now. 10 minutes ago it was urgent. Roy has reassessed. Roy straightened. Likely a ventilation issue. Daniel looked at the unopened tool case. Without inspecting anything? Roy's mouth tightened. Victor stepped between them. We are not turning a maintenance dispute into a spectacle. Then cancel the emergency order in writing, Daniel said, and preserve every upstairs file until morning. You do not have authority to demand that.
No.
But someone does. Evelyn's gaze shifted toward the brass VPT key inside Daniel's coat pocket. She reached in, took it out and held it beneath the task lamp. The worn letters caught the white light. Victor saw them. For the first time all night, his expression changed before he could control it. Not recognition alone. Calculation. Where did you get that? He asked. Evelyn closed her fingers around the key. You said it was just an old building. It is. Then why do you recognize the key? I recognize company property. VPT is not Crane Management. Victor's hand moved to his tie, straightening a knot that was already straight. Vale Property Trust no longer controls this site. The name settled into the room. Susan looked at him. Roy looked toward the office door. Evelyn's breathing changed, almost too slight to notice. Daniel noticed because he was standing close enough to see her thumb press into the edge of the key. You know the trust, he said. Victor's voice cooled. Anyone who reviews the ownership history knows the trust. You called it by its full name. It appears in old records. The records you said were ordinary maintenance files? Victor did not answer. The fan behind the stairwell door stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deeper than before. No paper moved. No printer clicked. Even dryer 14 had reached the end of its cycle and sat still, its metal shell ticking as it cooled. Evelyn turned to Daniel. There is another way in. Where? Through the old boiler passage behind the service wall. How do you know? She looked at the VPT key, then at Victor. Because my father showed it to me when I was 12. Susan inhaled sharply. Victor's face did not fall, but the muscles beside his mouth tightened. Daniel did not ask the question everyone else was suddenly thinking. He asked the practical one. Is it safe? If the renovation plans were followed. Were they? I don't know. Then we don't send anyone through blind. Evelyn's frustration flashed. Those files could be gone in minutes. And Noah is 10 feet away. We do this right. She looked toward the boy behind the counter, then back at Daniel. The anger in her face shifted into something more difficult. Reluctant respect. He was not slowing the truth because he feared Victor. He was slowing it because danger did not become acceptable just because the cause was righteous. Daniel crossed to the wall beside dryer 14. He removed the lower vent cover with a flathead screwdriver from his belt and shone a flashlight into the cavity. Dust floated through the beam. Behind a bundle of old pipes, a narrow brick channel ran upward. On the floor inside lay a fresh strip of white paper caught against a rusted valve. Daniel reached in with pliers and pulled it free. It was the torn corner of a repair invoice. The top half was missing, but the bottom showed a payment routing number and the final 6 digits of an account. Daniel placed it beside the dryer 14 invoice. The routing number matched. Evelyn unfolded the old warning notice. Same number again. One account, Daniel said. 3 kinds of records. Susan's eyes lowered. Roy closed the tool case fully this time. Victor took out his phone and turned away, speaking too softly to hear. Evelyn photographed the torn invoice and sent it to someone saved only as M. 30 seconds later, her phone rang. She answered on speaker. A woman's composed voice filled the laundromat. Evelyn, where are you? Victor turned at the name. Evelyn did not look away from him.
Riverside Weish.
Are you alone?
No.
I'm with Daniel Mercer. I need you to confirm a routing number. She read the digits. The woman on the phone went silent for 2 beats. That account belongs to Harrow Facilities Group. Who owns it? Publicly, a third-party maintenance vendor. Privately, the registered address matches the office of Martin Crane. Victor stopped moving. Daniel looked at him. Your brother. Brother-in-law? Susan whispered before she could stop herself. Victor's head turned toward her. The mistake was small, but it landed like a drop tool in an empty garage. The woman on the phone continued. Evelyn listened carefully. Do not remove anything else. I'm pulling the trust records now. If those invoices were approved after your father's authority ended, this is larger than billing fraud. How much larger? Tenant displacement, document tampering, possibly fraudulent transfer preparation. The word transfer changed Evelyn's face. She looked toward the waterproof envelope in her bag. Daniel saw grief rise behind her eyes, old and controlled. My father thought the trust was protecting the building, she said. He was trying to. The voice softened. And someone may have been using his illness to move assets before you took control. Victor put his phone in his pocket. This conversation is based on assumptions and illegally accessed material. Daniel picked up the torn invoice with a clean pair of tweezers and slid it into an unused plastic receipt sleeve. Then it should survive review. You are not an investigator. No, Daniel sealed the sleeve and wrote the time across the flap. I'm the man who heard a bad bearing. Evelyn looked at the table beneath the task lamp. The expired code, the false repair invoice, the altered camera time, the shredded files, the routing number, and the VPT key. None of them alone told the whole story. Together, they formed a pattern too deliberate to dismiss. She lifted the phone again. Miriam, get the original trust ledger and the transfer history. Victor's voice sharpened for the first time. This should be handled privately. Evelyn turned toward him. It was handled privately. That is how it survived this long. Outside, the rain began to thin, and the first gray light of morning entered through the glass. Daniel looked at the chairs, the machines, the apartment windows reflected above the storefronts across Riverside Row. If the list upstairs was real, this was no longer about his warning notice or one false repair. It was about every tenant whose rent had risen after repairs that never happened, every shop blamed for failures engineered on paper, every family pressured to leave before the building changed hands. He placed both palms on the folding table. No more closed-door meeting, he said. Everyone named in those records deserves to hear what is being done in their name. Evelyn met his eyes and nodded. By dawn, the truth would have to stand in the same room where Daniel and Evelyn had first been treated as if neither of them had any right to speak. By 6:30, Riverside Wash no longer felt like a laundromat. The folding tables had been cleared, the plastic chairs arranged in 2 uneven rows, and the fluorescent lights made every tired face look paler than it was. Shop owners from Riverside Row stood beneath the humming vents with coffee cups cooling in their hands. Susan Bell waited near the manager's office with her tablet. Roy Keller kept his red tool case closed beside his shoe. Noah sat behind the counter with his math workbook open, close enough to Daniel to feel safe and far enough from the center of the room to stay out of the confrontation. Daniel stood beside dryer 14 in the same blue work shirt he had worn all night. The sleeves were still rolled to his forearms. His brown coat remained around Evelyn's shoulders. He did not look like a man arriving to win. He looked like a man who had not slept and had decided that exhaustion was not a good enough reason to step aside. Victor Crane entered last. He had changed into a navy suit and brought 2 folders, a portable projector, and a representative from Crane Management's legal department. His expression carried the solemn patience of someone forced to correct a misunderstanding created by less informed people. "Thank you for coming," he said. "This will be brief." No one answered. The glass door clicked shut behind him. Outside, dawn had turned the wet sidewalk the color of dull steel. Victor placed 1 folder on the folding table and looked toward Daniel with practiced regret. During the night, Mr. Mercer violated after-hours access policy, obstructed an authorized safety inspection, entered restricted records areas, and collaborated with an unidentified individual to remove confidential property documents. A murmur moved through the room. Mrs. Alvarez from the tailor shop looked at Daniel, then at Noah. The owner of the corner market folded his arms. Victor continued before anyone could ask a question. "This is not personal. Daniel has been a reliable maintenance employee in many respects. But compassion does not excuse misconduct, and financial hardship does not place anyone above procedure." Daniel's hand rested on the edge of the folding table. He said nothing. Victor turned on the projector. Grainy footage appeared on the white wall above the washers. It showed Daniel standing before the stairwell door near midnight, keys in hand, Evelyn beside him, Susan several feet away. The clip jumped. Then it showed Daniel crouched beside the lower vent and removing its cover. The time code read 12:03. "There," Victor said. "Unauthorized access after direct instruction to leave the area." Mrs. Alvarez whispered something to the baker beside her. The legal representative opened a notepad. For a moment, the room shifted toward Victor's version because the picture was simple and pictures carried a kind of authority words often could not. Daniel looked at the screen. "Play the 7 minutes before that." Victor's expression remained neutral. "The available clip begins there. The system was recording earlier. The camera malfunctioned. Then show the malfunction log. This is not a technical hearing. You brought the footage." The exchange came quickly. Then silence settled between the rows of machines. The air conditioning fan clicked on above them, and the paper cups on the front table trembled in the draft. Evelyn watched Victor, not Daniel. She was still holding back the deed, the VPT key concealed inside the coat pocket, waiting to see what Victor would say when he believed the room belonged to him. Victor folded his hands. "Mr. Mercer is attempting to distract from the central issue. He admits he opened a restricted area. I removed a vent cover in the public service room," Daniel said. "The stairwell stayed locked. A technical distinction. A factual one." Victor nodded as though indulging him. "Then let us discuss facts." He opened the second folder and removed a transfer document bearing the digital signature of Evelyn's father. Vale Property Trust relinquished controlling authority over Riverside Row before the former trustee's death. Crane Management has operated under valid transferred authority since that date. The name changed the air. Several owners looked toward Evelyn. She stood very still. Victor finally faced her directly. "Whatever connection you believe you have to the former trust, it does not grant you present authority." Evelyn's eyes dropped to the signature. For the first time that morning, doubt touched her face in public. It was not belief in Victor. It was the pain of seeing her father's name used against her. Victor noticed and pressed gently, almost kindly. "I understand this may be emotional. Grief can make old family documents feel current when they are not." That was the first retention turn. The shop owners began to reconsider. A signed transfer could explain the expired code, could explain the VPT key. It could make Evelyn not an owner, but a grieving daughter carrying outdated papers into a building she no longer controlled. Daniel did not rescue her with a speech. He pulled out a chair and set it behind her. "You don't have to stand for this," he said. She looked at him, then sat without taking her eyes from Victor. Noah reached beneath the counter and brought out the quarter Evelyn had set beside her cup earlier. He walked only as far as Daniel's side and held it up. "She still has this," he said quietly. Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you, buddy." The coin did not prove ownership. It did not disprove the transfer. But Evelyn closed her fingers around it, and something steadied in her face. Victor glanced at the child, then quickly away. Daniel turned toward the folding table. He laid out the first document, the violation notice from the night before. This used an expired authorization code. Victor answered immediately. A shared template. Daniel placed the Dryer 14 invoice beside it. Same code. Integrated system. Daniel added the emergency access order. Same code again. Victor's legal representative leaned closer. That may reflect internal continuity. Across employment discipline, equipment billing, and emergency access? Daniel asked. Administrative systems often reuse identifiers. Then the dates should match the authority. The lawyer stopped writing. Daniel did not push further. He placed the access log next to the 3 forms. Victor's signature pressed through the top sheet into the carbon copy beneath, with the time recorded beside it. This was signed at 11:54 by the register clock and my watch. Susan lifted her tablet. The security system showed 11:59. It showed 11:59 after the clock changed. Victor sighed. Again, old equipment. Daniel looked toward Noah but did not call on him. The boy had already done enough. Instead, Daniel placed a printed still from the security monitor beside the log. The top corner showed 11:30 while the register receipt beneath it carried the same minute. A second still, captured later, showed the camera 5 minutes ahead. The clock was correct before Victor returned, Daniel said. Then it changed. Victor's smile remained, but his thumb began rubbing the edge of the folder. A reset during remote maintenance. Who performed it? Our security vendor. At what time? I would need to check. The remote session closed while Susan was here. Susan's tablet lowered by half an inch. Heads turned toward her. She said nothing. Daniel brought out the sealed sleeve labeled incident footage, 11:42-11:47. This was prepared before the incident ended. Victor looked at Susan. The label was automated. The sleeve was sealed by hand. For preservation. Before anyone knew preservation was necessary, the legal representative raised one hand. Let's avoid speculation. Daniel nodded. Agreed. He placed the sleeve down without opening it. He was not trying to humiliate Susan. He was letting the timeline remain where everyone could see it. Victor stepped closer to the table. You are stacking unrelated clerical issues and asking people to imagine corruption. No, Daniel said. I'm asking why the same mistakes always move in the same direction. The room quieted again. That was the line that changed the weight of the evidence. Mrs. Alvarez set down her coffee. The baker leaned forward. Daniel placed the dryer invoice under the task lamp and then crossed to machine 14. He opened the service panel with the same flathead screwdriver he used every day. The invoice says the motor was replaced last week. Roy Keller finally spoke. It was. Daniel pointed to the serial plate. Read the number. Roy did not move. Daniel read it aloud, then returned to the invoice and read the listed serial. They were different. Victor answered before Roy could. Replacement components are sometimes documented under distributor inventory numbers. Daniel nodded once. That would be possible. Victor's shoulders eased slightly. Daniel reached beneath the fresh service label and peeled back the older maintenance tag. Grease stained the edges. The same serial number was stamped beneath it. But this number belongs to the motor still inside the machine. The drum turned when Daniel pressed the manual test switch. 3 rotations. Then the old bearing scraped through the quiet room. The sound was rough, unmistakable, tired. Roy looked down at his unopened tool case. Victor's legal representative stopped writing altogether. Daniel shut the machine off. That invoice charged Riverside Row for work that did not happen. Victor lifted his chin. One disputed repair does not establish a conspiracy. No, Daniel said. It establishes a pattern worth checking. The second retention spike came from the back row. Mr. Bellamy, owner of the old bakery at the corner, stood slowly with both hands on the back of a plastic chair. They billed me for a replacement exhaust fan in March, he said.
12,000 dollars.
Victor turned toward him. That project was completed. No contractor ever came inside my bakery. The work may have been performed from the roof. Bellamy shook his head. The roof hatch is behind my ovens. I would have seen them. A second shop owner spoke. Then a third. New refrigeration coils. A replaced water line. Mold treatment in a basement no one had entered. Each charge had arrived before a rent increase. Each complaint had been dismissed as a safety expense. Victor raised both hands, palms outward. Please, we can review individual billing concerns privately. This meeting is about Mr. Mercer's conduct. Daniel looked at him. That's why we're here. Your employment status is not a community referendum.
No.
But their homes and stores are not private leverage. Evelyn's eyes moved to him. He was not using the crowd to save his job. He was using his risk to create room for others to speak. Miriam Cole entered through the glass door carrying a hard-sided document case. She did not introduce herself. She walked to Evelyn, set the case on the folding table, and whispered something in her ear. Victor saw the case and went still for half a breath. Then he recovered. Counsel, I assume? Miriam looked at him. For the trust. Victor tapped the transfer document. Then you know the trust no longer controls this property. I know what this says. It is properly executed. We will see. Victor's smile returned. You are welcome to examine a certified copy. Miriam did not touch it. She looked at the timestamp, then at the digital seal. Where is the original submission log? Victor's legal representative answered. Stored with the certifying platform. Then display it. That is not necessary for this meeting. It is if the document is your authority. Victor's hand settled on the transfer paper. This is becoming theatrical. Daniel's voice remained low. Then let the record make it boring. Miriam opened the hard case. Inside lay a sealed waterproof envelope, a small ultraviolet document light, and a laptop already connected to the state notary archive. Evelyn removed the brass VPT key from Daniel's coat and placed it beside Noah's quarter. The two objects looked almost ordinary under the fluorescent light. Victor's gaze fixed on the envelope. Around him, every whisper faded. Miriam entered a file number. The archive began loading. A progress bar moved slowly across the screen while the transfer document sat between Victor and Evelyn like a blade laid flat on a table. When the final record appeared, Miriam's hand stopped above the keyboard. She looked first at Evelyn, then at the medical certification attached to the filing, and finally at Victor. Before I open the deed, she said, someone in this room should explain how a man legally unable to sign created a new digital signature 3 days later. Miriam Cole turned the laptop so the room could see the state notary record. The transfer document carried a digital signature created at 9:14 a.m. on October 17th. Beside it, the medical certification showed that Evelyn's father had been declared legally unable to sign documents 3 days earlier. Victor Crane stared at the screen without blinking. That proves incapacity, Miriam said. It also proves this signature did not come from him. The projector fan whispered against the sudden quiet. Somewhere near the back row, a paper coffee cup bent beneath someone's fingers. Victor's legal representative stepped closer to the laptop. A previously authorized signature profile could have been applied by counsel. Then the filing account would belong to counsel, Miriam replied. She opened the submission log. It does not. A company name appeared on the wall, Harrow Facilities Group. Daniel looked at the torn invoice sealed beneath the task lamp. The same routing number sat at the bottom of the paper. Miriam entered the account details. The registered address matched the office of Martin Crane, Victor's brother-in-law. The room did not erupt. Contracted. Mrs. Alvarez slowly lowered herself into a plastic chair. Mr. Bellamy removed his glasses and wiped them, though the lenses were already clean. Roy Keller stared at his closed red tool case as if it belonged to someone else. Victor drew one breath through his nose. Harrow is an independent vendor. It received payment for repairs that were not performed, Daniel said. He did not raise his voice. He touched the service tag beneath the new label on dryer 14. And its account uploaded the document you say transferred ownership. Victor looked toward the machine. You are not qualified to interpret corporate records. No, Daniel answered. But I know this motor was never replaced. Miriam clicked open the notary metadata. The filing originated from an IP address assigned to Crane Management's administrative office. A second record showed the digital signature template had been created the morning after the medical incapacity notice entered the trust system. Susan Bell's tablet slipped slightly in her hand. She caught it against her coat before it reached the floor. Victor's attorney stopped taking notes. There may have been delegated authority, Victor said. His voice had gone dry. Show it, Evelyn replied. She stood from the chair Daniel had placed behind her. His brown work coat still hung from her shoulders, too large at the wrists, rain-darkened at the cuffs. She did not look like the cold woman who had stood outside the glass hours earlier. She also did not look triumphant. She looked wounded in a place money could not protect. Show one valid delegation signed before my father lost capacity. Victor opened the first folder. His fingers moved through the pages more quickly than before. Paper whispered against paper. He found nothing. Miriam opened the sealed waterproof envelope. Inside lay the original deed, the embossed seal catching the fluorescent light, and a certified trust succession order naming Evelyn Vale as controlling trustee of Riverside Row. The document was not waved above the crowd. It was placed flat on the folding table, exactly where Victor had placed Daniel's suspension notice. Evelyn reached into the coat pocket and removed Noah's quarter. The coin looked impossibly small beside the legal seal. She placed it on the lower corner of the deed. Noah stood behind the counter, one hand gripping the edge. Daniel glanced toward him. The boy let out a breath he had been holding and looked up at his father. "That's hers," he whispered. Daniel nodded once. "She kept it." Evelyn's fingers remained beside the coin. "Last night, this boy gave me what he had because he thought I needed it more." She looked across the room, not at Victor alone, but at every person who had watched her through the glass and decided what she was worth. His father opened the door without asking my name. He did not know I controlled this trust. He did not know I could protect his job. He believed I had nothing to offer him. Victor closed the folder. Personal sentiment does not determine ownership. "No," Evelyn said. "Evidence does." Miriam placed the succession order beside the deed. Vale Property Trust never approved the transfer. The document presented by Crane Management was filed after the trustee lost legal capacity, using a signature profile created after that incapacity, through an account tied to a vendor receiving disputed maintenance payments. She turned another page. Under the trust agreement, the transfer is void. Crane Management's delegated authority expired 8 months ago. The expired VPT stamp on Daniel's violation notice lay visible beneath the task lamp. The wrong code appeared on the dryer invoice. The same code appeared on the emergency access order. 3 documents. 3 uses of authority that no longer existed. Daniel placed the access log beside them. And this was signed last night to enter the upstairs archive. Miriam examined Victor's pressed signature and the time Daniel had written beside it. Evelyn set her old phone on the table and played the recording. Victor's voice filled the laundromat, calm and unmistakable. Those files were supposed to be cleared months ago. No one moved while the words ended. The phone continued recording 2 seconds of empty room tone, the hum of fluorescent lights, the scrape of dryer 14, a child turning a page. Then Miriam played the anonymous video of the security employee feeding records into a shredder. The clip ended on the polished black shoes near the filing cart. Victor glanced down at his own shoes. It was a tiny movement, but half the room followed it. "That does not identify me," he said. "Not by itself," Miriam agreed. "The access log, remote camera session, account records, altered timestamps, and your own statement will be preserved for investigators." She closed the laptop halfway. "No one here is deciding criminal liability this morning. We are preserving evidence and ending unauthorized control." That distinction changed the scene from vengeance to consequence. Evelyn lifted the suspension notice from the table and read it once. Then she tore nothing. She crumpled nothing. She handed it to Miriam for the file. Effective immediately, Crane Management is suspended from all operations at Riverside Row. Account access is frozen. No records may be removed, altered, or destroyed. The tenant association and its council will receive copies of every rent adjustment, repair charge, and access log from the past 3 years. Victor's attorney leaned toward him and spoke too softly for the room to hear. Victor did not answer. The pen in his hand slipped onto the folding table and rolled until it touched Noah's quarter. The small metallic tap seemed louder than the projector. Evelyn continued. "All pending eviction notices and rent increases issued under expired authority are stayed. Every affected tenant will receive independent review. Harrow Facilities Group will be audited. The evidence collected tonight will be transferred to civil investigators and the appropriate state offices." Mr. Bellamy's mouth opened, but no sound came. Mrs. Alvarez pressed 2 fingers against her lips. The customer who had filmed Evelyn lowered his phone and turned the screen toward his chest. Even Susan seemed unable to look at the tablet she had used to record Daniel's violation. Victor stood at the opposite side of the deed. His face had not collapsed into rage. That would have been easier. Instead, the confidence drained from him by degrees, leaving a man who could no longer make procedure sound like truth. "Evelyn," he said, using her name for the first time, "we should discuss continuity. Removing management without transition could harm the very tenants you claim to protect." She looked at Daniel. "He is right about one thing. A building cannot be protected by a vacuum." Victor's shoulders lifted slightly, as though he had found the last narrow bridge back into the room. Evelyn removed Daniel's key ring from the table where Victor had placed it earlier. She held it out to Daniel. "I want you to serve as interim operations manager while the trust establishes independent oversight." Daniel did not take the keys. The room waited. He looked at the deed, the coin, the faces of shop owners who had spent years being told their struggles were isolated mistakes. Then he looked toward the ceiling, where families lived above the storefronts. "What happens to them?" he asked. Evelyn lowered her hand slightly. "Who?" "The families upstairs. The owners behind on rent. The people whose bills were raised by repairs that never happened." Victor stared at him. So did everyone else. Daniel had been offered the thing Victor had used against him all night: authority, employment, control of the keys, and his first question was not whether his apartment was safe. It was whether the people with no place at the table would be protected. Evelyn's eyes softened, but her answer remained precise. No displacement during review. Emergency assistance for verified hardship. Public accounting of every maintenance charge. Tenant representation before any future increase. Daniel looked at Miriam. In writing, she said. Only then did he accept the key ring. The metal settled into his palm with a familiar weight. Dryer 14 reached the end of its cycle. The drum slowed. One turn, another. Then the old bearing gave its final scrape and stopped. The projector fan became audible. Rainwater ticked from the gutter. Noah slipped his hand into Daniel's free hand. Victor looked at the coin resting on the deed, then at the keys he no longer controlled. He could not speak. No one could. The entire laundromat stood inside that silence, not because a wealthy woman had revealed what she owned, but because a man who owned almost nothing had just shown them what authority was supposed to protect. And as Evelyn watched Daniel close his fingers around the keys, one question remained. Would he use the power placed in his hand to secure a better life for himself? Or would he rebuild Riverside Row so no one's dignity could ever again depend on one manager's permission?